very much. Thank you. It is so nice to be here, and as Elaine said, I think I've been coming here since 1980 or something like that. That's when I self-published this book in a 1980 first edition, and this is in its 30th edition now. And I've written 30 or 40 books, and I've got a staff of 100 people that help me up in Seattle. And I'm just doing the same thing I've always been doing since I was a college kid, is spending 4 months a year in Europe, making all the mistakes, taking careful notes, and coming back and helping people learn from my mistakes rather than their own, in hopes that they can have a better trip. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and put it into this book. So I'm very, I'm so thankful. I just love my work. I get to spend, I'm sort of in a rut. I've spent 4 months a year in Europe for the last 30 years. I spend April and May in the Mediterranean, then I go home in June, and then July and August north of the Alps. So we've made about 150 TV shows over the years, and if somebody says, when did you do that Barcelona show? All I know, it was in April or May. And then when did you do that Ireland show or that Norway show? That would have been in July or August. Because it just makes sense to travel smart with the seasons and so on. You know, I've been coming here for, what's that, 30 years, I think. And when I look at my passion for teaching, it is, I didn't have any grand plan, but when I look back on it, it was like kind of like teaching Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First of all, I started with the basics, the foundation, and that would be the skills. Europe through the back door. How to catch the boat, how to pack light, how to stay healthy, all of that, okay? And that was my theme in the 80s. And then in the 90s, I figured, well, you've got that foundation. You don't go to Europe just so you can get 8 hours of sleep. You go to Europe and you want to get 8 hours of sleep and catch the train and pack light and stay healthy and all that. But you go there to enjoy the history and the art, or the cuisine, or the wine and the culture. So in the 90s, I was all about teaching Europe 101, history and art for the travelers. And I just love teaching that. And then since about 9/11, I think I've slid up, and it was no big plan. It was just sort of my natural passion for teaching, was to come back with what I think is the pinnacle of that hierarchy of travel needs. Getting out of your comfort zone, gaining an empathy for the other 96% of humanity, hanging out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given, and coming home with a broader perspective, which I think is the most beautiful thing to me. So that's what this is all about, travel as a political act, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I have to apologize. I sent a whole bunch of newsletters and journals from my Holy Land experience, and a catalog with all of our tour information, and it's hung up in UPS somewhere, and it didn't get here today, so I'm sorry about that. But all of that information is on our website. I've got a PDF that's a 50-page full-color journal from my experience in the Holy Land last year. I happened to be in town because we were at KQED this weekend doing a travel marathon, and all the shows were Israel, Palestine, and Turkey. And they're going to run it. It makes so much money for KQED. They're going to run it 3 or 4 times in the next couple of weeks. So you can watch that and hopefully support public broadcasting, just like you're supporting an independent bookstore. This is what Elaine and I are just really passionate about, is having these independent sources of information, whether it's books or whether it's broadcasting, right? And But when we think about all of these different ways to travel, oh man, it is so exciting for people to go to Europe. But that's the springboard for world exploration. And my main thing is to get people beyond Orlando. All right. So I want to share with you the lessons I've learned from this. But before I do that, I'll make a quick sort of housekeeping kind of thing. I know that you guys I think this event is free if you buy a book, or otherwise it costs $12. And if you pay $12, you can apply that to a purchase of a book. Seems like a very smart way to get a group together and make it work for everybody. This is the text for today's talk. And this, you'll notice, is different than that. And this is about the first time I've held this book up in public, because this is the brand new edition. We rushed it to the printer, and I had my all hands on deck up in Seattle, because you don't want to get a slow book to book passage, No, it was, we wanted to get the new book out for the new TV release of the Holy Land. And this is updated for the Holy Land experience. It's also updated since we legalized marijuana in Washington and Oregon. Because I learned a lot about that in Europe. and there's a chapter in here on European drug policy. There's a chapter in here on Central America. There's a chapter in here on Turkey, on Scandinavia, on India, on all sorts of ways that we can hang out with people who tackle the same problems that we do with a different perspective, a different context, a different kind of set of baggage. So this is, liberation theology, and the whole tenor of things in Central America has changed a lot since that edition of the book. So this is updated in that regard also. So this is the brand new edition of this book, and I'm just thrilled that Book Passage has a lot of these, and that you guys a lot of you will be able to read that. Also, the most important book that I'm not talking about today that's the Foundation, Europe Through the Back Door, and there's a book called Europe 101. I should mention, on my website, my drive in the last year has been to capture all the talks that we give up in Seattle, because I've got all sorts of great guides and wonderful writers and so on, and we stream these lectures, and we post-produce them very nice, and then we park them on our website so you can kind of go to school on our website. So you can hear my Europe Through the Back Door talk. You can hear my Europe 101 Art for Travelers talk. When I talk about packing light, women don't believe me, so I've got women that teach packing light. A whole hour of travel packing wisdom up there. I've got a 2-hour talk on Italy, a 2-hour talk on Germany, Austria, Switzerland, an hour talk on Scandinavia. We've got all sorts of lectures, and they're all free on our website. So I'm just giving one of those talks today, and if you'd like more of them, please take full advantage of that. Also, with a group this size, what I want to do is some Q&A is going to be fun, and we can do that after I'm done with this talk here. And then afterwards, I just happy to sign autographs, and it's just a little congested up here. So what I'm going to do afterwards is go out the front door and stand outside in the courtyard there. And this is an exercise in lining up as if you're in Italy. I'd like you to just, assuming you want an autograph, I'll just pack around me all 360 degrees, and then I just sign anything in front of me like this. And it goes really fast. And then I think that's just a good way to take care of all that. So I just want to make sure if you want an autograph that you know that I'll be out there and I'll be just happy to do that. As far as photographs go, you're welcome to take all the photographs you want, but I'm not going to pose and wait for somebody else to figure out your phone camera, okay? So you can shoot all the cameras you want, but don't ask me to pose until I'm done autographing, and then I'll be happy to pose if you're still around and you want that. Okay, enough of that sort of housekeeping. Now I want to talk about this whole fun of traveling in a way that opens you up to the rest of the world. I really just love going, as a travel writer, bringing home the magic. That's my challenge as a travel writer, whether I'm up organizing tours, writing a guidebook, making a TV show, or whatever, getting it so people can understand the magic of travel. Now, my beat is Europe, so most of my anecdotes are from Europe, but it could be anywhere. For instance, when you go to Europe, when you travel, you get closer to nature. And when you come home, I think you appreciate nature more. It's a beautiful thing. We've got wonderful nature here, but when you're traveling, you're tuned into that. I mean, when you go to the Swiss Alps, you can ride these people look rugged, but they didn't break a sweat to get here. They rode the lift up and had breakfast in a revolving restaurant. Now they're walking on a ridge. Imagine tight roping on a ridge for 3 hours. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eigermonk in Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alphorn announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open, it's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. I mean, that's a beautiful moment. You gain that when you travel, connecting with nature. Now, also, when you travel, you connect with culture. And, for 25 years, I was taking groups around as a tour guide with my tour company. For the last 10 years, I've just been taking the tours instead of leading them. My specialist guides do a better job than I ever could. And I remember from my tour guiding time, how a lot of Americans are sort of put off by somebody else who's enthusiastic about something that you or I might not think is worth getting all excited about. You know, there's a lot of French people that are really excited about expensive, stinky cheese. Now, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, cheese was no big deal. It was orange in the shape of the bread. Here, cheese sandwich. And now you go over there and they're evangelical about their cheese. You know, I mean, you step into a cheese shop, it's a festival of mold. The cheesemonger sees the bumpkin American, oh, come over here, smell this cheese. Oh, it smells like the feet of angels. Smells like the feet of baseball players to me, but whatever, you know. Now, it's not that they're more sophisticated than us or better than us. That's what you got to remember. It's just they're really into that. And it's with the enthusiasm of a child in 3rd grade on Monday with show and tell. You remember that? we're really excited about something we did this weekend, we want to share it with our friends. People who are excited about things want to share it with their friends. When people come up to Seattle, we take them down to Pike Place Market and they throw salmon all over the place. We're excited about that. You go to France, they're excited about their cheese. You go to Italy, they're excited about their truffles. So what we want to do is let them show off, embrace it, try it. When you go home, you can ignore it, or you can incorporate that into your life and you become a little bit of a hybrid when it comes to culture, and that's a beautiful thing. History becomes fun when you travel. I got a history degree accidentally at the University of Washington. I didn't plan on it. I just remember waking up one morning in the dorm and it occurred to me, I've got 7 history classes under my belt, 3 more, and I'm a historian. Let's push on through. Let's push on through. Because I was taking history classes because they were fun. Because I had been there. Napoleon was right there and then I get to read about him. It's just, it comes to life. In our travels, I think it's really important that we see history as unfolding all around us, as happening today. It's not just in history books. I know from my work as a tour guide, it's a challenge to have people thinking of history as a living thing. And what I like to do when people are traveling is to remind them 100 years from now, people will look back at this generation and think that was a heady time to be living. And we need to be aware of that today. It is so rewarding. Here's an example. A while ago I was in Berlin on the opening day of their new Capitol building, their Reichstag building. And this is the building that was bombed out in World War II. The last days of World War II were on the rooftop of this building, Russians fighting Germans. Can you imagine a country losing its war and the army does its last stand on the Capitol building roof? That's quite heady. And then through the Cold War, this was just a black bombed out hulk on the middle of no man's land, the Berlin Wall. Suddenly the Cold War is over, Germany is united, the government goes from Bonn back to Berlin and they need a new Capitol building. What do? They don't bulldoze the bombed out building, but in good European style, they renovate the historic building and then incorporate a modern element into the top, a beautiful glass dome. What an exciting time to be there. I was there during the opening week of this thing. It's free, it's designed mostly for Germans, but tourists are more than welcome to rock right up to the top. Powerful architectural symbolism. They could stand up on the top and literally look down over the shoulders of their legislators. Germans have been jerked around too much by their politicians in the last century. Now they're going to physically be keeping an eye on them. You see? Those legislators are down there looking up at the citizenry. I was on top of that building on that opening week, surrounded by teary-eyed Germans. Anytime you're surrounded by teary-eyed Germans, something exciting, something exceptional is going on. And it occurred to me, wow, the opening of this building was the powerful, symbolic closing of an ugly, difficult chapter in the history of a great nation. No more communism, no more fascism, no more division. A united country with a new Capitol building, starting a new century, looking into a promising future, filled with hope. Many of those teary eyes were old enough to remember Berlin when it was just literally rubble. What an exciting moment to be up there. And I looked around at the other American tourists up there. Not one of them had a clue. It was just, my battery's low, why don't they air condition this place? I need a Coke. And I thought, I'm living in a dumbed down society. It saddened me. And, I've thought about that a lot. There's been a huge change in the last generation, I think, in our society. And now everything's corporate. Corporations have a legal obligation to profit maximize in the short term. That's all that, if you run a corporation, you're beholden to your stockholders to pedal to the metal at all costs. And corporations know that smarted up people are harder to make money off than dumbed down people. I really believe there's a subconscious interest in dumbing us down in our society because it's more profitable in the short term. And that threatens the fabric of our democracy. As a tour guide, you make more money in tourism if you just take people to the beach and talk about duty-free shopping and frequent flyer miles and all that kind of stuff. It's not wrong in itself, but if it bullies you out of a meaningful experience in your travels, that's not good, you see. And then we've all lost something. So in my own world, my own little world as a travel writer and a tour operator and a TV producer, I vowed to myself to expect my travelers to be engaged and smartened up. I'm so thankful I've got an opportunity to make TV shows for public television. And I won't go into a pledge drive here, but I'm really tempted. But think about Travel Channel. Is there any travel on Travel Channel anymore? What happened? It didn't make money for the advertisers, so they dumbed it down, they got cheaper reality shows, and they've got just this freak show kind of stuff now, but it's no longer thoughtful travel. And that's simply because that's a commercial broadcasting network and they have to make money by selling ads, you see. Public television is that oasis on the dial that can respect your intellect, assume an attention span, and bring you programming not driven by a passion to keep advertisers happy, but by a passion to better understand our world, you see. And in our travels, we have that opportunity, but we owe it to each other to be engaged, and that's what I love to do in my travels. One great thing about travel is you meet people that are not like the normal people you hang out with. Now, I'm just looking around here to see how homogenous this crowd is. This is pretty darn homogenous right now. It says that homogenous is my world. I mean, that's where I live and go to church and work and everything. It's just people that celebrate Christmas the same way. And that's fine, you know. But it is stimulating and constructive to get out of our comfort zone once in a while and find ourselves being the ones that are stared at and the oddities. And I think that's, sometimes you gotta encourage yourself to do that because a lot of times we find it more comfortable to stay within our comfort zone. So put yourself in a position where you're no longer the norm. And I think that reaps great benefits when you're traveling. Now these encounters you have with interesting people don't need to be like earth-shaking big deals. They can kind of just be goofy sometimes. I was in Italy recently and this little kid was just staring at me. It's kind of rude. Finally his dad said, "Excuse my son, he stares at Americans." And I said, "Well, what's with that?" And he said, "Last week when we were at McDonald's, my son, noticing the fluffy white bun, said, 'Dad, why do Americans have such soft bread?' And the dad said, 'Son, it's because Americans have no teeth.'" Now, I don't think the dad meant anything by that. That's just what dads do when they're out with the kid, is they entertain themselves by saying nonsensical stuff to their children. But the kid was confused. He stared at me, and I showed him my teeth to overcome that little bit of misunderstanding between peoples. But it reminded me there are goofy misunderstandings that exist between peoples. For years, I went to the communist countries in the Warsaw Pact, and I had great friends over there during the Cold War. And I had friends in Bulgaria, for instance, and they would sit me down every year when I visited and ask me questions that they were confused about from their propaganda and what they thought must be the reality. I remember they said one day, "Now, okay, you live in a capitalist world where everything's private property. If everything's private property, how can you go anywhere without trespassing?" You see, it was just very perplexing to them. And when I got to meet them, they better understand us. And then we humanize each other, and it makes it tougher for their propaganda to demonize us. And it makes it tougher for our propaganda to demonize them. And what's not to like about that? It's a beautiful thing to get out and meet people. When it comes to meeting people, Ireland is a great place. I just love Ireland, yeah. I think it's one of the reasons I really love Ireland, because I think in Ireland, I think I like it so much because in Ireland I have this sensation that I'm understanding a foreign language. It's just, I don't speak any other languages, I wish I did, but in Ireland everybody communicates as if they're speaking a foreign language to you, and I've got a theory about this. I think it's because they think in Gaelic, and they're translating directly from Gaelic into English. Would you mind turning the wind off up here? It's just too hot, yeah. Or it's too cold, yeah. Okay. Thanks. And if you guys are all hot and stuffy, give me a holler and I'll find a place for you to sit. Okay, no, I'm kidding, let me turn it back on. Let's see, but when you go to Ireland, the west coast of Ireland is where they have these national parks for the traditional culture. They're called Gaeltachts, literally where they speak Gaelic. So you walk up to these guys, they're talking to each other in Gaelic. And the tourist doesn't even know it. And I step up there and they turn to me without missing a beat and speak in English. And then I say goodbye and they flip back into their Gaelic. It's amazing how many small languages are being spoken in Europe today, more than the last generation actually. Now, so if you want Ireland in the traditional extreme, you do go to the Gaeltachts, those west coast. We're way on the west coast where they stand on the bluff and they stare out at the Atlantic and they say, the next parish over is Boston, all right? And you get talking to these guys and they've got an incredible gift of gab. It's an art of conversation. Be talking to these guys for a while. I'll never forget, I was asking a guy on the left after a while, I said, "Were you born here?" He said, "No, it was about 5 miles down the road." Later on, I asked him, "Have you lived here all your life?" He said, "Not yet." So it's just, that is, to me, so much fun to meet people like this and put a face on that corner of the world. And when you travel, you meet people. In fact, that's the mark of a good trip. If you're not meeting people, it's your mistake. There's people everywhere. You can meet people anywhere you travel, in the States, north of the border, in Europe, in the developing world, whatever. You gotta be an extrovert. Get out there and make it happen. Now, as I said, my beat is Europe. And the exciting thing about Europe in the last generation is the unification of Europe, the creation of the EU. Now this goes all the way back to the years after World War II. Imagine 1947, sitting in the rubble of a bombed out continent. Thought leaders, statesmen, philosophers, caring citizens got together. They said, this is insanity. Twice in our lifetimes we've bombed ourselves into rubble. We've got to do something really radical or our children are going to be digging out again. And they said, we need to weave our economies together, specifically the economies of Germany and France, so there can never again be a war like this. And they set out to create a United States of Europe. Now that's a hard thing to do because you got all these proud sovereign nations, and unity is meaningless unless you can talk sovereign nations out of giving out a little sovereignty, right? So it's been an awkward, stuttering, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back evolution for 50 years now. And when you think about it, it's a great success. You can put down Europe, as Americans tend to do, for all of their over-the-top regulations and political correctness and stuff like that. But I'll tell you, the triumph of the European Union is the fact that there will never be another big war within Europe, you see. Anything else is small potatoes compared to the accomplishment of weaving the economies of France and Germany together so there can never again be a major confrontation in Europe. And for that reason, I'm so thankful for the European Union. Now, it was also done to create a free trade zone from an economic efficiency point of view so they could compete with a free trade zone like the United States of America and emerging economies like China and India. And Europe is now a free trade zone of 400 million people that produces $15 trillion of stuff a year. To compete with the free trade zone called the United States of America, which is 300 million people producing the same $15 trillion of stuff a year. Now, a lot of Americans are put off by European socialism, and we're quick to put them down at any chance we can, just writing them off as idealistic liberals that are living in a sort of a miserable situation where they can't really work hard and get ahead. For instance, it only takes 300 million Americans to earn $15 trillion, and the Europeans take 400 million people to earn the same $15 trillion. Well, true, we make more per person than they do, but if this person who was putting down the European system gave you the full and honest story, they would say, but Europeans choose to work 20% fewer hours and willingly make 20% less stuff so they can spend more time with their families. That's really it. Now, it's not a judgmental thing. We have every right in the world as a society to work ourselves into an early grave. We have the shortest vacations in the rich world, and we're proud of it. We don't even take our vacations all the time, you know? And we always talk about family values, but we compromise our families because we want 2 incomes so we can still have the dreams that we have. So, you know, there's just different ways to do this. I'm certainly glad as a businessman that I run my company here in the United States. I employ 100 people, I employ them well, we produce great stuff, and I make lots of money, you know? It's a beautiful system. I can turn on a dime. I would be very frustrated in trying to employ people in Europe. On the other hand, I think we can learn a lot from Europe, and they have a much more honest system of accounting that deals with the real fallout of aggressive business practices and have to pay for it up front instead of trying to put it off down the road, you see. So we can learn when we travel. We don't need to embrace everything. It's not a matter of they're right and we're wrong or anything like that. We can learn. And when you go to Europe, you find they work hard and they also play hard. And I'll tell you, they play hard. It's kind of annoying, frankly. I mean, this is Wednesday afternoon in Amsterdam. I'm running around doing my work as a guidebook writer, and I see a bunch of men. These are not students. These are grown men on a little party boat. And I'm thinking, maybe I'm missing something. So I ask them, hey, what's going on, you guys? They say, it's Wednesday afternoon. You want to get in the boat? Every week we cut out our work early on Wednesday so we can get together with our mates. That's just a choice they make, you see. So it is kind of fun to be able to compare that. Now, you'll hear about economic challenges. And it's really important that we think about these economic challenges in a little more independent style than just taking whatever's dictated to us through the media. Because the media is corporate run, and it has to be in sync with that whole system. I mean, think about our economic crisis that we've been through lately. Who names these things? Economic crisis. And why do we just accept it so docilely? I mean, in the name of the economic crisis, we've done some pretty amazing things. Now, what is that crisis? I mean, we're the envy of 90% of humanity, Europe and America. We make, if there's a crisis, half of humanity is trying to live on $2 a day. There's 1 billion people trying to live on $1 a day. That's a crisis. Now, I don't want to belittle anybody's personal crisis if they're out of work or their business just went out. That's a crisis indeed. But our economy as a whole has been growing. It's already filthy rich and successful, and it's been growing every year through the crisis. I would say if there's a crisis, if we were at least free to look at it, there's a crisis of distribution within that already very, very successful and growing pie. Now, in Europe, they've got a crisis also, and you'll see a lot of people marching on the streets in Europe. I think part of the crisis in Europe is they've got to deal with a change in their demographic makeup given their lavish entitlements. Europe has entitlements that make ours look stingy. And when they were devised and implemented originally, they were really smart. They were sustainable, they were compassionate, and they really made a successful society. They were put into action when it was a young society with a lot of people working, not many people living to retirement, and those who didn't live very long after that. It was a pyramid-shaped economy. When you got a lot of people working and not too many old people, you can sustain that, right? Now, because of their entitlements, this is my own travel guide's theory on economics, so take it for what it's worth, but because of their smart entitlements, it became a successful society, and they became very well educated and very wealthy. They're among the best educated and wealthiest people on the planet. Now, it's just a straight fact. When a society becomes smart and rich, they live longer and they have fewer kids. All right? So, the pyramid-shaped demographic situation, because of the entitlements, is now flip-flopped, and you have a relatively few people working, a lot of people living to retirement, and then they live way too long after that. It's a serious problem. And the sorry lot in life for politicians in Europe these days is to stand in front of their workers and say, I'm sorry, the arithmetic is just not there anymore. We don't have enough young people working. We have too many old people taking all of these lavish entitlements, and we've got to change the rules on you because the arithmetic doesn't add up. It's just kind of straightforward, but that's enough to really upset people. You worked your whole life for this promise. Your parents got it, your friend who retired 5 years ago got it, and now you got to work another 7 years, more than what they promised you. That's enough to make anybody in this room go downtown and burn a Starbucks. Decent people are angry, they go out and raise their voices, and in Europe, the working class really has a thing about getting out in the street and demonstrating. In France, la manifestation. All over Europe, I get caught up in these big demonstrations. This is in Portugal, where my friends say the Portuguese don't really know how to demonstrate with any anger at all. It's like a little party out on the streets. But I want to remind you, you're going to be seeing a lot of these demonstrations in Europe, and it has nothing to do with, is it safe to go there? You know, think of all the people that canceled their Greece trips because they saw those demonstrations on Syntagma Square. It's just another case where we overreact to media, and it's a crisis that's been created to get in the news, and we make that even worse by overreacting to it. Remember, Europeans just get out and march all the time. Now, the American workers have the same frustrations, but all that marching is just way too much exercise. So what we do to vent is we go home and we find a TV station that affirms our frustrations, and then we just shake our fists all together. We get angry that way. But it's, I think, the same kind of venting over the same kind of recalibration that has to be done. Now, the big news in Europe is, in our lifetime, is the movement to the east. With the end of the Cold War, the entire Warsaw Pact has basically joined the European Union. Almost overnight, you got 100 million new capitalists. Boy, I remember back in the Cold War days, this is in Poland, which today is a festival of pent-up entrepreneurial spirit. I remember how gloomy and bleak it was back in the Cold War when they had this clueless command economy ignoring the laws of supply and demand. In fact, I remember in Poland, people were actually taking their windshield wipers, if they were lucky enough to own a car, they were taking their wipers in with them every night. Why? Because somebody upstairs forgot to order windshield wipers, demand exceeds supply, thieves get wind of that, they'll steal your wipers at night and sell them for a relative fortune in the black market tomorrow morning. That's how black markets work, is when the laws of supply and demand are not able to go freely. Of course, today the laws of supply and demand are kicking in all across Eastern Europe. There's more than enough windshield wipers produced and distributed to meet the demand, and people are leaving their wipers on their cars all night long in Warsaw. It's so exciting to be in Eastern Europe. I was just in Poland on the last week of my trip this last summer, and I tell you, it just feels good over there. It's really thrilling. And all the signs that used to say Pope John Paul II, now they've put a little, they bolted a little word over Pope, and now it says Saint John Paul II. And Poland is really on a special high because of that, along with a lot of other things. So it's fun to go there and check it out. I was just in, this is in Gdansk, where the Solidarity movement started, you know, and big parks and people out playing, and it's just a lot of fun. Also in Poland, this is, it was a little festival going on kind of on the square, and this man is giving out apples. And I noticed when I was in Poland on this last trip just a couple months ago, everywhere I went there was baskets of apples. On every restaurant table, a basket of free apples. In every hotel room, a basket of apples. On the streets, people are giving out apples. And this is all because of the Russia boycotted Poland on its apples, because Poland was speaking out against them invading the, messing up with the Ukraine, you know, because Poland is right there, and they're nervous too, and they're standing with Ukraine. And so Putin said, we're not going to buy your apples anymore. And Poland produces a lot of apples destined for Russia. So it's basically piss off Putin and eat an apple. Okay, that's what's going on in Poland right now. They're just eating all the apples so that Putin doesn't get his way. One of the charming things for me about Europe is the cultural diversity. I mean, you go a couple of hours in your car or on the train, and it's a whole different language, a whole different culture, a whole different heritage. And when you think about it in Europe, when Europe is uniting, you'd think that would be threatened. But the counterintuitive result of Europe's unification is more cultural diversity. Let me explain that. In our lifetimes, headlines, I mean, you remember there's three sort of loyalties: region, nation, and Europe. If you ask a friend in Munich, where are you from, he might say, I'm Bavarian. Or he might say, I'm German, or he might say, I'm European. Ask a friend from Barcelona, where are you from? They might say, I'm Catalonian and proud of it. Or they may say, I'm Spanish, or I'm European. On every city hall in Europe, you'll see three flags. The region, in this case Scotland, the country, Britain, and Europe. So, in our lifetime, the regions have been challenging the nations, and that's been making most of the headlines. You know, Basque people threatening Madrid, Celtic people threatening Paris, Irish and Scottish people messing up London. Since Europe is uniting, the nations realize they're not going to be players in the future, and they give their regions a little more wiggle room because power is coming out of Brussels. Okay? For that reason, when you travel around Europe today, you'll find more autonomy in the regions. Britain just gave Scotland the opportunity to vote itself into freedom if it wanted. A few years ago, London let the Scottish people build their own parliament in Scotland for the first time since 1707. And now they've got a lot more autonomy because of the negotiations, because of that recent vote. When you go to Madrid, or when you go to Barcelona, you'll remember that, you know, a few years ago, you couldn't teach your kids Catalan, you couldn't wave the Catalonian flag, and you certainly could not dance the Sardana dance outside of the cathedral after Mass on Sunday. Today, the kids in Barcelona are learning Catalan first, and they're learning Spanish as a second language, believe it or not. People can wave their own flag instead of their soccer team flag when they want to show their patriotic spirit. And every Sunday after Mass, the people who really celebrate Catalonia do the circle dance, the Sardana. It's an exciting time. Now, when you go to an ATM machine in Catalonia, you'll find 4 language buttons that are all Spanish languages. Because remember, there's all these little groups. I was talking to my friend in Barcelona. I said, so this is the region of Catalonia, right? No, we're not a region. That implies we're part of Spain. We are a state, with a nation without a state. That's what they said. We're a nation of people without a state. And they have empathy and solidarity with the other victims of the tyranny of the majority, kind of, you know, these little groups in big countries that have to put up with that. And you will find they will respect each other in the sense of language buttons on an ATM machine. So here you see on the ATM machine in Barcelona, Catalan first for the people of Catalonia, Espanol for most Spaniards, Gallego for the Spanish people of northwestern Spain, the Celtic people, and Euskara for the Basques within Spain. And then you got a button for the German, French, and English-speaking people, and one button for everybody else. Now, if you were to go to Catalonia, or from Catalonia, if you were to go to Basque country, you'd find the same 4 buttons on the top. You'd probably have Basque first, but you'd have Catalan up there. Not because Catalonian people going to Basque country couldn't speak Spanish or English and get their money out of that machine, but out of respect for the struggles of the Catalonian people, just as the Basque people would expect the Catalonians to respect them. So you've got that wonderful sort of solidarity going on all across Europe. This man is named Armin Walsh. He's a friend of mine. He's the Indiana Jones of Tyrolean archaeologists. And he's got all sorts of exciting ideas. And what he does is he renovates old castles and turns them into museums. And it takes a lot of money. And when he needs money for his projects, he does not go to Vienna, because they get nothing. He goes to Brussels. And he doesn't go to Brussels and say, I've got a great idea for Austria, even though he's an Austrian. He goes to Brussels because he'll go home with nothing. Brussels is not interested in funding things that promote the entities created after wars that have nothing to do with ethnic regions. Okay, those were lines drawn after 1918 that go back to Habsburgs and families that own stuff and so on. Brussels is interested in funding and underwriting ethnic regions. So Armin's no dummy. He goes to Brussels and he says, I've got a great idea for the Tyrol. You see, the Tyrol is an honest-to-goodness ethnic region that ignores the political boundaries of today. It's part in Italy and it's part in Austria. And Armin gets money from Brussels. He comes home and he does his thing for Tyrolia. In Europe, there are rich countries and poor countries, but they're all in this together. And rich countries put in more than they take out, and poor countries take out more than they put in. They're net receivers rather than net givers. And all over Europe, they're investing in their infrastructure, just like here in the United States. Poor states got the interstate system just as well as the big rich states, even if they weren't able to pay for them equally. In Europe, everybody gets wonderful infrastructure. I remember when I was first traveling in Europe, the 4 poor countries, Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland, had literally no freeways. Now they're laced with beautiful German quality freeways. This one's in Ireland, and generally when you see a new freeway, you'll often see a European flag. This says, this Irish project has received 85% financial assistance from the European Union. In other words, France and Germany paid for this road. Now you Irish people better use it, because we're keeping up with the United States. It's so fun to go to Europe and check out that infrastructure. All my life, when I go to Greece, I've been crossing the Gulf of Corinth on a funky ferry. And then a couple years ago, I come there and I find this amazing bridge. First thing I thought when I looked at that bridge was, this is not a Greek bridge. This is a German bridge, built in Greece to get German trucks loaded down with gummy bears over the Gulf of Corinth, down into the Peloponnesian Peninsula where they can make their business. I asked my German friends, don't you get tired of bailing out these lazy, corrupt Greeks time after time? They're spending billions of euros to bail out Greece. And my German friends said, well, yeah, that's the problem, but we've made a lot of money off of Greece over the years, and we expect to make plenty of money off of them in the future, and we have to keep them afloat somehow. So it's just, they're all in this together, and they have to bolster up the weak links of the European Union. As a traveler, it's so fun to see this infrastructure. I was just making a new TV show in Berlin, and this is the mightiest train station in Europe, the Hauptbahnhof. 1,000 trains a day coming and going from this train station on different levels and at right angles. It's just breathtaking what's going on in the trains in Europe. I was recently in the train station in Munich, taking pictures of trains coming into the station, specifically what were cute little birds squished onto the windshield. Yeah, I know, it's terrible. And when I first saw that bird, I thought 2 things. First of all, I thought, man, this is a dangerous continent if you're a slow bird. And then I thought, you'd wait all your life to see a bird squished to the windshield of a train where I live. It's a surreal image. I don't know about here in the Bay Area, but up in Seattle, this just doesn't happen. I could imagine a bird sitting on a folding chair on the rooftop with a cigar and a drink, maybe. But not plastered to the window. And when you go to Europe today, part of the fun of traveling in Europe is just enjoying the infrastructure. I was just on a train going across France, and I noticed the speedometer on that train only illuminated when it was going 300 kilometers or more an hour. That's about 200 miles an hour. They were shy. They were didn't want to talk about it when it was going less than that. And it was smooth, it was silent, beautiful pastoral countryside outside the window, and then bam, you're in Paris. It's really exciting to check that out. Now, when we travel, it's fun to know that, we have the 4th of July here, but every country's got their own 4th of July. As simple as that may seem, I think sometimes we Americans have to be reminded that August 1st is the 4th of July in Switzerland. May 17, that would be a good time to be in Norway. And of course, the French Bastille Day is 10 days after our celebration. And I grew up thinking, the world's a pyramid with the United States on top and everybody else trying to figure out how to do it right. And then I travel and I realize that people find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. I travel and I realize, we have the American dream. I've got the American dream. I think it's a great dream for me to have. But other people might not have the American dream. I just thought anybody who had their act together would have the American dream. And then you travel around the world. You go to Sri Lanka, these people have the Sri Lankan dream. You go to Norway, people definitely don't have the American dream in Norway. They got the Norwegian dream. You go to Morocco, they've got the Moroccan dream. And that's not unpatriotic, that's just exciting. We can celebrate that. That's a beautiful thing. Americans need to get over this ethnocentric notion that we are exceptional. We're unique, I think we could say that. And but I mean, the only thing exceptional about us in God's eyes is our ability to think we are exceptional. So when we travel, it's just fun to give people a little chance to explain their perspective. There is a lot of spine and a lot of pride outside of our borders, and I just love that. I remember as a tour guide, don't worry about this slide for a minute, but as a tour guide, touring around in eastern Turkey with 25 Americans on a bus. What a great, there's no famous sites. All there is it's a cultural scavenger hunt. So I'm running around Turkey with my guide and 25 people on our bus. We're looking for things to see and do. Here's a high school stadium filled with kids. Stop the bus, let's go inside. 200 high school kids gathering together, thrusting their fist up in the sky and singing in unison. We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation. Oh, I asked my guide, what's going on here? Don't they like God? And she said, no, we love God, but given the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over our border, think ISIS, we're very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state here in Turkey, given to us by Ataturk in our constitution in the 1920s. Wow, I didn't realize Turks were defending the separation of mosque and state, and it was dicey these days. Think of the challenges we have for the separation of church and state. Whether you're Christian or not, I mean, you can recognize the value of keeping things pluralistic and as having a secular government. And in Turkey, that's quite a struggle. Later on that trip, we went to a little village that I think had never seen a group of American tourists. And we stopped there and we went in, met the mayor. When the American group comes in, it's big news, so the mayor comes out to greet us. And he says, come over to my house. So we go out, we just invade his house. There's 25 of us in his living room, and some musicians are there playing music, and everybody dances as they do whenever there's an excuse to dance in Turkey. And I was the tour guide, so I'm the big shot in the group, and he's the mayor, so he's the big shot there. So he comes over to me and he wants to show off. He says, come over to the wall, the most sacred place in my house. This is where I hang my Quran. This is my sacred Quran bag. And he said, in my Quran bag, I also keep a copy of the Bible and the Torah. Because the way I see it, we're all people of the book, children of the same God. And I just treasure those little moments when I can get a little glimpse on how other people can see things that you wouldn't get otherwise. On that same day, we went to the woodcarver shop. And this woodcarver was the most proud guy in the town. Everybody in the region wanted a prayer niche carved by him. And he'd never had a bunch of Americans gathered around his workshop as he did his work. He was showing off, we're all gathered around. Suddenly he stopped, and I'll never forget this moment. He held his chisel high into the sky, and he declared, a man and his chisel, the greatest factory on earth. And I thought, there's one proud man. He doesn't need me to encourage him to go to night school to get computer literate, He's doing his thing, and he's proud of it. Later on, I asked him if I could buy some of his art and take it home, and he said, no, for a man my age, to know that some of my carving will go back to the United States of America and be appreciated, that is payment enough. Take this as a gift from me to you, and when you get home, remember me and remember our village. Just beautiful moments. That's so nice. Now, anybody can have these moments. That's what gets me all excited. You just have to get out there and get out of your comfort zone and meet people and be open. And it's just, that's what distinguishes a good trip, and we can all do it. It's so easy for us to think of our way as the norm. And it's such a good reminder to find that, in a lot of ways, we're not the norm. We're the oddballs. I mean, I'm thankful we do things the way we do. I generally am glad that I live here, and I'm always going to live this way. But I was in Kabul once, in Afghanistan, just passing through, and I was sitting in the cafeteria like all the backpackers going to Afghanistan did, and a man joined me. He sat down, and he said, "Can I join you?" I said, "You already have." He said, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you do. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same." I thought, you've got a chip on your shoulder about this issue, don't you? And later on, it occurred to me, you know, I did think less of him because he eats with his fingers. I just thought that was not as civilized. And then I learned, in their perspective, this is just the beautiful thing to do. God gave us these fingers to nourish ourselves with. It's a holistic way to eat. And I went to restaurants for the rest of that trip through South Asia, filled with professional local people with no spoons and forks, and a ceremonial sink in the middle of the room where people would wash up and then eat with their fingers. And it actually became quite natural for me. In fact, I had to be retrained when I got home. It's so fun to just humble your ethnocentricity. That's why India is my favorite country. It humbles my ethnocentricity in so many ways. There are struggles that would just blow us away. We learn about these when we travel, and when we learn about these, we see other people dealing with the same challenges we're dealing with, and we can learn from that. I was just in the Netherlands, and you know, we talk a lot about global warming and climate change and the rising sea. You gain a different take on that when you travel. I mean, when you go to the Netherlands, famous for their frugality, they're spending billions of dollars to beef up their dikes in anticipation of this. They're not going to be wasting all this money without a real threat. And you see that here as they're moving mountains, literally, of sand and making these dikes stronger. When you travel, you can connect with other cultures, Nathan Hales, Ethan Allens, and Patrick Henrys. I remember when I was a kid, so proud of those great patriots, and they are great patriots, worth pride and worth that kind of honor. But I do think it's wrong to think that they are one of a kinds, because there are Nathan Hales for other cultures all over this planet. Think Nelson Mandela. Think Archbishop Oscar Romero. And when we travel, if we can get our brains around a contemporary Nathan Hale from a different culture, I think it's very instructive. When I go to Central America, I've gone there on 4 different educational tours just to learn about what's going on down there. And Archbishop Oscar Romero is just an inspirational person. I was down there during the, this Contra Sandinista time, and up here it was framed as a war of communists against capitalists, right? Well, down there it was framed, or was a war of landowners against landless peasants, really. It's easy for us to embrace that war because we're against communism, but when you go down there, you realize in El Salvador, 5 families owned all the arable land. And if you're an elite that owns all that land, and you want to make some serious money on that land, you're not going to grow rice and beans for local peasants to buy from you. You're not going to make a killing on that. You're going to grow fancy food to be exported north to the United States. It's just common sense. So when that goes to the extreme, suddenly there's no land for local people to own to feed local people. There's land for big shots to own, to export north to make serious money. Consequently, there's not enough food grown in that country to feed the local people, whose only employment is to work on that big plantation. So they get into this vicious cycle of working on plantation wages to grow food to be exported to the north, and the only thing they can buy is food in tin cans exported from America down to there. So they just get it coming and going. And when you push them long enough, you've got an uprising of peasants, and then you got to slam them down again. And that was really the genesis of that war. And Archbishop Oscar Romero stood with the landless peasants in this fight, and he said, "I'm going to be shot, but I will rise in my people." And he was assassinated, and he rose in his people. And I went back down there several times, and I saw Archbishop Oscar Romero living in his landless peasants, that community. And on the 25th anniversary of his assassination, I was heading down to Mazatlan for a family vacation, and I was due for a vacation. I was fantasizing about a pristine stretch of tropical beach, swept free of local riffraff, just me and my rich white American friends. We were going to have a paper strap on our wrist so we didn't have to dirty our fingers with local coins, and we'd have all the margaritas we could have, It was going to be great. And then my friends in El Salvador said, "We're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the assassination of we're remembering the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero." I told my friends and family, I'm not going to have any fun on the beach. I got to go to San Salvador. So canceled that vacation for me. I went to San Salvador. It was the time of my life from a travel point of view. No more expensive, no more risky than going to Mazatlan, that's for sure. But it was just life-changing, literally life-changing. I was eating rice and beans one day and beans and rice the next. I was covered with bug bites, but I was marching with tens of thousands of locals. Anybody could do it. To remember that Nathan Hale of that beautiful little country. And with that big procession, we came to this monument in downtown San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador. I looked at that monument and I thought, now wait a minute, this is our monument. That's the Vietnam Memorial. And they said, well, no, it's the same design, okay, but this is our memorial. There's just as many names, 50,000 chipped into that black granite, but these are people who died fighting you, the United States of America. Now, maybe they were communists and we had to kill them all. I don't want to, it's a whole different discussion. I'm not going to wade into that. But the fact is, these people have baggage. They're a country of 5 million people that lost as many people as we lost in the Vietnam War. Think of the proportions there, you know? That's baggage. And I'm really fascinated in baggage lately because, frankly, I'm just amazed at how much baggage 9/11 has given us. You know, that was a tragedy, but get a grip. You can't say that, I know, but I just said it. We lost, 300 million of us lost 3,000 people 12 years ago. In my town of Edmonds, the flag is still at half-mast. And I just think we've got to move on a little bit. I grew up with Cold War baggage, Germany, Japanese, communist baggage, you know, my parents had depression baggage. Okay, we have baggage, but we got to remember other countries have baggage too, and just like we'd like people to understand our baggage, we don't normally do that, but we've got baggage, so we're doing that because we're concerned about our national security, you know. We do things that are not true to us because of our baggage, and we justify it because of our baggage. Other countries do things that are not true to them either because of their baggage, and they justify it just like we do. And when I travel, I like to find out that baggage. That's one of the reasons I went to Iran. I wanted to understand why 70 million Iranians would vote for a guy like Ahmadinejad. It must be some kind of baggage that I don't get. And I wanted to know. People asked me when I went to Iran, why are you going there? After that, I thought, well, I think it's good character to know people before you bomb them. Sometimes you got to bomb people. I'm not pacifist completely, but every bomb that drops and every bullet that flies has my name on it. I'm a taxpayer and I want to know what's going on. Why is this happening? And it's the natural inclination of a mighty nation to dehumanize their enemies before they have to kill a lot of them, so we don't pay much attention, you see. And I don't buy that, you see. Those people are just as precious as us. And a lot of bad stuff happens that we need to take responsibility for. So I wanted to go to Iran, and I have this gig as a public television producer, and I can make a show on Iran and it'll actually air. You couldn't do that on commercial television, obviously. So I wanted to go over there and not come home with answers, not come home saying this is right and that's wrong, but just provide context and humanize 70 million Iranians. So went over there. I was scared at first. I almost left our big fancy TV camera in Athens thinking we'd go in with our little sneak camera. I thought people would be throwing stones at us when they saw an American crew on the streets of Tehran. I'll tell you, I've never received such a warm and friendly welcome on any street while I'm working as when I was in Iran. It was amazing, really. Now, it was kind of strange. Iran's a big city, 12 million people. And you see these big 8-story tall hateful banners, a United States flag that says down with the USA, with bombs, dropping bombs for stripes and skulls for stars. And I just thought, awkward. But I found such friendly people on the streets. It didn't add up to me. And then it occurred to me that banner is much older than most of the people on the streets. And with their government, you can't really question that banner. What's the reality? The people are the 35-year-old banner, you know. I was on a traffic jam down here later that day. It was just silent. And suddenly the man in the next car asked my driver to roll down the window, like this, you know. And he handed over a bouquet of flowers to my driver, and he said, "Give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic." Yeah, I thought that never happens where I live. But we had these kind of moments, like just like insane friendliness in Iran shown to me, and it was just amazing. Later on, we were stuck in another traffic jam. Again, it was just silent. Spent a lot of time going nowhere in traffic jams in Tehran. Suddenly, my driver, he just blurted out. He said, "Death to traffic." I said, "No, wait a minute. I thought it was death to America or death to Israel." And he said, "No, right now it's death to traffic." And I said, "Well, what's with that?" And he said, "Here in Iran, when something's frustrating to us and out of our control, we say death to that. And right now, traffic is frustrating, out of my control. Death to election fraud, death to Obama, death to Ahmadinejad, death to traffic, you know." And I just thought about that, and I thought, you know, he doesn't speak English very well. He speaks Farsi. He speaks very halting English, and he was directly translating what they commonly say when something's frustrating them: "Damn this traffic. Damn equals death too." And I thought, you know, this is embarrassing. My whole country's getting all bent out of shape because we don't know how they're translating damn. There's so many Americans that'll go to war over a bumper sticker and an out of context little moment in the commercial news. And I thought, he's just saying damn the traffic, damn Obama, damn America, damn Israel. I thought, have I ever thought damn something, damn those teenagers? Right. Well, sure I have. Now, do I really want them to die and burn in hell for an eternity? Not yet. But it's after midnight. Turn down the music. Damn those teenagers. Death to teenagers, you see? So I just thought it's important for us to see a little bit of the nuance in this stuff in our travels. And when you go to Iran, boy, I'll tell you, it is a fascinating country with a lot of baggage. What is their baggage? Of course, we have 9/11 baggage. Their baggage is Iran-Iraq war baggage. They lost 300,000 people in the 1980s when they were invaded by Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, funded by the United States of America. Now, we don't like to believe that, and I don't even know if it's true, but they believe it, and that's their baggage. And outside of every Corte, Madera, and Edmonds, and Chehalis, and Fresno, there is a vast martyrs cemetery. And it's as filled with mourners today as it was 20 years ago. And when you think about this widow, who every Friday for 25 years has gone to the tomb of her loved one and sobbed, you think that's baggage, and there's 300,000 casualties. 100 times the casualties we have in 9/11, with 1/4 of our population. It's baggage. It changes the way they look at things, just like it changes the way we look at things. And as long as people are insanely burdened by their baggage, it's going to be tough to get it together. On the last day of our visit there, it kind of came together. I was doing my work in the streets, and this woman, a professional woman, well-dressed, came across the street, and she said, "Are you an American journalist?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I want you to go home and tell the truth." And she did this on my chest. "We're united, we're strong, and we just don't want our little girls raced like Britney Spears." I thought, neither do we. It'd be Miley Cyrus now, but when I did that, it was Britney Spears. And I thought, that's what's racking these people with all sorts of concern. When we talk regime change, remember, the older people in Iran lived most of their life under the Shah. And the Shah was put in there in 1953 when their democratically elected prime minister nationalized their oil. You can't nationalize oil in Iran. Otherwise, we throw out the leader and we put on a friendly guy to us, like the Shah. And for the whole generation, when the Shah was in power, cosmopolitan big shots in Tehran were bragging the miniskirts are shorter in Tehran than they are in Paris. Well, that's fun if you're a cosmopolitan big shot in Tehran. But the vast majority of the people are in the countryside in Iran. And that was the devil incarnate, put there by America, and that's baggage. I just think it is so interesting when I thought about that woman in the Britney Spears comment, that the people who vote for Ahmadinejad are just like their counterparts here. They're small town, less educated fundamentalists. Good people. I want to stress that. Good people motivated by fear and love. You know, there's so much fear and there's so much love. And that's really a powerful thing. And we have to understand that. And when we travel, I think we can. And when you go to a place like Iran, anybody here can go to Iran. I mean, the lonely planet book to Iran is here, and it sells quite well. Americans don't go there much because we don't think we can, but it's like going to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. You could do it, but you had to have certain things to get a visa. But I'll never forget going to this in the parks there and seeing the school groups out on field days. I can still hear the teacher of these girls barking at her girls. I don't know the Farsi, but I know what she was saying. Girls, this Western gentleman's going to take your photograph and you look like a bunch of floozies. Cover your hair. So they'd all giggle and cover their hair, and then we'd be ready for the photograph. You know, I did a follow-up. My Iran experience was so a challenge for me and gratifying. And I'm so thankful that public television can air this stuff, that in the last year we did a lot of work in the Holy Land, and we produced a 1-hour special on the Holy Land, just like Iran, not to point blame or have any solutions, because it's more complicated than a 1-hour show, that's for sure, and I'm just a travel writer, but to give context. I wanted to just understand both narratives, come home and humanize the situation, and I think we were able to do that beautifully in the Holy Land. This is going to run 4 or 5 times in the next month on KQED, so I hope you can watch it. And I want to remind you there's a show on Israel and a show on Palestine that are really travel logs. And then there's one that's called The Holy Land, which is a whole hour that gets beyond the travel log stuff and deals with some of the more complicated issues. But I hope that you can watch it. When we think of the Holy Land, it's quite interesting. There's 12 million people in the Holy Land living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. 8 million live in Israel, 4 million live in Palestine. In Israel, 6 million Jews, 2 million Muslims. In Palestine, all Muslims except 2% Christians. When we think Palestine, it is Gaza and the West Bank. Most of the people and most of the land is in the West Bank. I stayed away from Gaza, which is a more difficult situation with Hamas and everything, and all of the tragedy in recent months has been between Gaza and Israel. The West Bank is where we can travel very easily, and the West Bank is circled by the wall, which was put up after the Second Intifada with so much killing. And the problem with the wall is it's twice as long as the border it claims to defend, gerrymandered into the West Bank to grab aquifers and arable land and places for settlements and so on. But it's a very interesting and complicated issue. It's easy to travel there, and I would just encourage anybody going to Israel, which is a great place to travel, to go across the wall and have some time in the West Bank. There's nothing dangerous about going to the West Bank. I know a lot of people think it's insane to go to the West Bank. In the last year I've been in Egypt, Palestine, Turkey, Russia, Israel, a lot of great places that don't get a lot of tourism. And some of my loved ones have said, do you think that's safe? And I always tell them, as long as I'm not going to Chicago, I think I'll be just fine. And I'm not saying Chicago is dangerous. I'm saying those places are no more dangerous than Chicago. I mean, if you get in the wrong neighborhood, you can get yourself in some crossfire. But as a tourist, you're fine in the West Bank. What is really gripping or edgy about the West Bank is the poverty. There's a tenfold difference in what people make in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. $3,000 a year, $30,000 a year on average, you see. You can bicycle from where Jesus was born to where Jesus was crucified in 30 minutes, if you're a tourist. If you're a Palestinian, you can't, because there's a wall in between. And if you're an Israeli, you can't, because you can't go into Zone A in Palestine. So the difference is huge because people can't talk to each other. They got that wall. The unintended consequence of that wall, I think, is to keep people from talking. Now, in the West Bank, the pivotal sort of thing is this. This is Abraham's tomb, which goes back 2,000 years before Christ. And Abraham's tomb is holy to Jews and Muslims, because from Abraham came the Israelites and the Arabs. And what we have today is a medieval building with a synagogue on this side and a mosque on that side and bulletproof glass halfway around Abraham's tomb, so people can worship on both sides of their common patriarch. And that bulletproof glass is there because during a Ramadan prayer session in the 1990s, I think it was, an Israeli came in there and killed 24 Muslims as they were praying. And that's not, I mean, the Muslims have killed Jews and back and forth, but there's a lot of tragedy and bloodshed in the history there. Going around Israel, you feel the excitement of a new nation created basically since 1947. It just had its 65th birthday. We were there on their 4th of July, and man, it was fun, and barbecues everywhere. But then a mile away is this big wall. Israelis would rather we call it a fence, but it looks like a wall to me. And on the other side of that wall, they have the same day, which is another festival. It's called the Day of Catastrophe. The day Israel won was the day the Palestinians lost. And it's just exciting to try to get each of the narratives. I was in the Israeli settlements in West Bank and hanging out in the park, talking to families, saw the little kids with their toy guns, shooting imaginary Palestinians, and I thought that's kind of crummy. And then I went into Palestine to the refugee camps and saw little kids with their toy guns there, shooting imaginary Israelis, and I thought, that's crummy too. And then I thought, when I was a kid, my parents gave me toy guns. And who did I shoot? Indians. Why not? You know, that's what you do. You shoot your parents' baggage, you know, and with a wall, you can't talk to the other kids. So it's very poignant. It's very exciting. I shot Indians, but I also shot communists, Germans, and Japanese. See, I shot all of our enemies. But it's just, that's happening today, and when we travel there, we can talk to beautiful people in Israel and beautiful people in Palestine, and I just think it's a shame to go to Israel and not go into Palestine. One thing I always do when I go to these places like Iran and Iraq is have a landing page on my website where I connect our travelers with my guides. You know, when you look at my TV shows, I've always got a friend, don't I? Always with me. It seems like I got friends everywhere. I'm just paying them to be my friends. For a price, they'll be your friend also. Everywhere I go, I've got friends because they're local tour guides. They're nice people and they're earning a living, and I hire them for half a day, and you can too. The interesting thing is the cost of a guide goes down as the value goes up. You know, the most expensive place for a guide, London, it's cost a fortune, and you don't need a guide there. But in Palestine or Russia or Turkey or Bulgaria, you can get a local guide for $100 for half a day, and it makes all the difference in the world. So think about that in your travels. This photograph here is just very meaningful to me because I had the joy of traveling with a beautiful Israeli guide, Abi, and a beautiful Palestinian guide, Kamal, and it was really a challenge for them to find a place where they could park their cars next to each other so I could go from one car to the other. We finally found a restaurant with a parking lot outside of Zone A in the West Bank where a yellow-plated Israeli car and a green-plated Palestinian car could park next to each other, and the tourist could go from one to the other. And I had the joy of introducing my two friends to each other. They were beautiful people, both interested in both narratives. They lived 10 miles apart from each other, and they had never seen each other's town because of that stupid wall. And this is just the frustrating thing about that wall, because there's so much interest in talking and getting beyond this, and there's so much old-fashioned narrative baggage that you can't talk to each other, and it makes it a challenge. So if you get a chance to watch the show, or you can go to my website and hear the interviews and so on, but we just learned so much about that. I'm still got about 15 minutes to go. I think I'm talking a little longer than I thought I would, but it's nice to have you stuck in this room. I want to remind you that you can learn more about everything I do. I've got 100 workmates up in Seattle, and we're doing all sorts of stuff, making our TV shows, our radio shows. All of our radio shows are available on our website, 9 years of weekly hours. All of our TV shows are available anytime. You could go home and watch the Iran show right away, just clicking through. You could see all 4 shows on Ireland, or all 4 shows on Turkey, or whatever, and drill deeper, and you got lots of free information. Our Facebook page is just lots of fun. I've always loved to take people behind the scenes on Facebook, and you can learn more about that when you go to ricksteves.com. Now, when you travel around, you realize the United States is really excited about liberty, but there are some places that are every bit as excited as we are, maybe even more. Here's a place with double the liberty. This is the hometown of Salvador Dali in Spain, Cadaqués, a wonderful place. When you travel around, I love the energy societies put into sharing one generation's traditions with the next. Here in a little town in northern Italy, there's a festival every summer where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a nice ravioli. It's just a beautiful thing. Just like my grandma wanted me to learn how to make a krumkake from Norway. And you know, it's just a natural thing. You want that tradition to carry on. Here's a little town in France where the local Chamber of Commerce has spent a lot of money to create these orbs so visitors can go and enjoy the fine differences in the bouquet of the different wines that are made in that valley. In this little part of France, a good nose is a life skill worth having. I love it in Europe, where people willingly pay too much for their loaf of bread in order to buy it from the person who baked it. Whereas here in the United States, we aspire to have a big freezer in the garage, so we only have to go to the big box store once every 2 weeks. They have a little refrigerator under the sink, so they have to go to the market every morning and check in with their neighbors and pay too much for their goods to be part of the fabric of their neighborhood. It's just family values. Europeans appreciate their fine wine, and they know where to fill it up really cheap. This is a literal filling station for wine in Italy. And a couple times a year, locals will fill their car up with empty glass jugs, go there, and it's the cheapest liquid you can buy. Now, I'm interested personally in how different societies legislate morality. And, in Europe, they really believe that a society has to make a choice, tolerate alternative lifestyles or build more prisons. And then they always follow that up with that annoying little statistic. You Americans lock up 10 times as many people per capita as we do here in Europe. Either you are inherently more people, or you've got some screwy laws. I know, it was all exciting, 3 strikes and you're out, it sounded good. But right now, we've got more people in jail than any other country, civilized country. And you look at Europe and they don't lock up many people. The Dutch, they have so much free prison space, they're renting empty cells to the Belgians, literally. Now, when you think about it, we legislate a lot of morality. Prostitution's a good example. Prostitution's criminal here. A lot of crime, a lot of disease, a lot of violence associated with it. And nobody would say prostitution's a good thing, but in Europe they kind of realize it's going to happen anyways. Why don't we exercise what they would call pragmatic harm reduction? Let's see how we can minimize the harm this persistent problem is going to cost our society, and see if we can handle it with education and with and this kind of approach. You'll find a lot of red light districts and brothels in Europe. The idea is these sex workers are independent business people. In order to get a license, they need to be checked by a doctor so they're not spreading diseases, and they renew their license by being checked again. When they have a problem client and they push their emergency button, they're not rescued by a pimp, but they're rescued by a policeman. It doesn't work quite that nicely, but that's the ideal. And if nothing else, it's a very exciting sightseeing attraction in a lot of these countries. Now, I routinely in Europe stumble onto bathrooms, toilets with blue lights. And you walk into I was just in Switzerland, and you go down from the restaurant into the toilet, and you step in, and you're blindsided by blue lights. What's the deal? Well, when there's blue lights, you cannot see your veins. You can't shoot up. It's very frustrating if you're trying to shoot up. And there's just a lot of junkies on the streets in Europe. For years, I took my groups around Europe, and they were noticing there's a lot of drug addicts in this liberal place over here. The difference is they've got the same as us, 1% of their society. Theirs are just more noticeable because they're not in prison and they're still alive. We lose twice as many people to overdoses every year as Europeans do. On a normal year, we lose 18,000, they lose 8,000. They handle it as a health problem and an education challenge more than a criminal issue. Across the street from that frustrating toilet, there would be a machine that used to sell cigarettes. Now it's been rejiggered, and it sells government-subsidized syringes almost free. Nobody shares needles over there. The government thinks that's silly. Let's just provide them with needles. In Europe, in the United States, that'd be a tough sell because, that's endorsing what they do. In Europe, the word for addicted is, in many countries, the same as enslaved. People are enslaved to drugs. They're not criminals, they're sick people. They don't need cops and judges and lawyers. They need doctors and nurses and counselors. And down the street, on a side street where you don't see a lot of tourists, is a place called a Cafe Fix, a government-funded heroin maintenance clinic. And it's an ugly place with wasted people, but it's a beautiful thing because they're dealing with these people who are enslaved to hard drugs with compassion rather than moralism, you see. And it works compared to ours. It's not perfect, but they're thinking out of the box and they're trying to fix things up, and I find that quite interesting. Now, a big issue in the United States and a big issue in Europe is marijuana. Of course, in Europe, a joint is about as exciting as a can of beer, and for 15 years I've been a board member of NORML, working to take the crime out of the equation in marijuana. I'm certainly not pro-marijuana. I think it's a civil liberty for the responsible adult use, and I think that use will not go up when it's legalized. We'll just take the crime out of the equation. I believe there's a huge black market that's untaxed and unregulated, and it just makes more sense to make that a regulated legal market and tax the heck out of it and earmark that tax revenue to support drug education programs and health programs. And then you let your police focus on serious problems. This is my bit of my stump speech that I gave in 10 different cities around Washington, and I just spent 6 or 8 days in Oregon doing the same thing. As we legalized marijuana in Oregon, it's all hands on deck for the drug reform guys to come to California in 2 years. And you're going to hear a lot about it. You've had it before. We learned from you guys 4 years ago to make our law more public safety and less pro-marijuana. I work with the ACLU and NORML and different organizations for public safety laws that law enforcement embraces and public safety and health people embrace. That's why our city attorney in Seattle and our federally appointed prosecuting attorney and leaders on our congressional group and so on in child safety affairs and so on all endorsed or co-sponsored our laws. When you look at it, it's not pro-drugs, it is pragmatic harm reduction. So it's interesting to pay attention to, but what I do is inject a European sensibility into the discussion. Here in the United States, we have 80,000 people in jail today because of marijuana use. Not selling, just possessing and using. We lock up 800,000 people every year. Now the tragic thing about it is they're not rich white guys that are getting busted. They're poor people and black people. It's the new Jim Crow. It's a very clever way to disenfranchise young black men, is to have this law against marijuana. Now a lot of Americans think, yeah, there's going to be so much use of marijuana. The use is going to go through the roof if it's legalized. I firmly believe there is not a reservoir of decent people that would love to ruin their lives smoking pot if only it was legal. Anybody who wants to smoke pot does, and we're proving that in Colorado and Washington. Use is not going up. Crime is not going up. DUIs are not going up. I just had lunch with my governor, who's a friend of mine, Jay Inslee. He wasn't even on board until after he got elected the same day we legalized marijuana. And now he told me, I'm so thankful I don't have to arrest 5,000 people this year that we would have arrested otherwise. We're making tens of $millions in tax revenue now. We pulled the rug out from under the black market that was enriching and empowering gangs and organized crime. And now our law enforcement can focus on things that really matter. It's a fascinating issue. And I talk about it because I can. You know, I mean, it's not a big deal now, but when I have been talking about that in the past, people just thought they would assassinate your character if you talked about this, but I don't need to get elected, and nobody can fire me. Every once in a while somebody says, I know what you think about marijuana, and we're not going to take your tours, and we're not going to use your guidebooks, and all I can think is Europe's going to be more fun without you. Some people think it's a gateway drug. You know, marijuana's not that big a deal, but it's pretty soon they're going to be on heroin. Well, my European friends have taught me the only thing gateway about marijuana is the fact that it's illegal. Because when it's illegal, you have to buy it from a criminal on the street who's got a vested interest in selling you something more addictive and more profitable. The two most progressive countries in Europe when it comes to drug policy, the Netherlands and Portugal, have made their progressive laws in order to fight hard drug problems, and they've been very successful in that. It's a longer talk than I have time to give right now, but 10 years ago, Portugal legalized the consumption of all drugs, hard and soft, because after Salazar's dictatorship, they had this hedonistic fling, and they had a horrible amount of hard drug-addicted people. And they said, we got to do something, serious about this, so they legalized all drugs, made it a health problem and an education challenge, and made the police friends of the drug-addicted population instead of the enemies. And 10 years later, they reassessed it. The conservatives who opposed it 10 years before were now in power. They looked hard at it with skepticism, and they said, this has been very good for our society. And the conservatives in power in Portugal today re-upped what they call Law 30 for another 10 years. Because their hard drug-taking population has dropped 50% in the last decade, from 100,000 to 50,000. The marijuana-taking population has stayed the same. They didn't get the drug tourism they feared, and they've saved millions of dollars and let their police now have more respect in the community and focus on real crime. So this is the issue, and I'm just so excited that California is going to break the back of the prohibition of our age in 2 years when you'll see me down here giving talks. Okay, Thank you. And if you want to know, when you get the Travel as a Political Act book, it's so interesting how Europe approaches this. So I've written a lot about that in Travel as a Political Act. When you study different societies, you learn a lot. And the cool thing about studying America and Europe is we're like sister societies. We're both really wealthy. We're both capitalist. We're both Christian. We're both pluralistic and secular. We're both government by, for, and of the people. The difference is, I think, in the United States, we are government by, for, and of the people via the corporations that we own. Not a judgmental statement. I mean, you could debate that and so on. But we just think the government's role is to keep us safe and create a good environment for our corporations to prosper. Okay. In Europe, I find it's government by, for, and of the people in spite of the corporations that they own. You see. In Europe, you'd be more likely, well, the European government goes to bat for things that don't show up on the quarterly profit statements of a real corporation here in the United States. There's a lot of expenses to society that we don't have to account for it. We just put it off. In Europe, the government makes the corporations pay for it now instead of society pay for it later. And it's a fascinating thing. You'd be more likely to see a law that requires you to pay for the disposal of your car when you buy it in Europe than here in the United States. Because here in the United States, it's not good for business, and that's the litmus test for a law, you see. So it's an interesting thing to compare. If you want to see Europe in the extreme, you go up to Scandinavia. That's the most highly taxed, most socialistic, least church-going, most littered, and most content part of Europe. Scandinavia. It's Europe in the extreme. Now you go to the main square, you don't see a church, you see a city hall. Like here in Stockholm and here in Oslo. And the city hall feels like a church when you go into it. Humanism is the religion. You've got a big gathering point, you've got a nice lectern instead of a pulpit. You got grandiose mosaic paintings on the front wall, not celebrating Bible stories, but celebrating heroic individuals who contributed mightily to their community. That's that Scandinavian socialism, which I find very interesting. All over Europe in my work, I've got sounding boards that I get to talk to in my work, and I just pop questions on them. This is Ollie. He's my friend in Switzerland. You might have stayed in his bed and breakfast, or you might have seen him on my TV show. He's the only school teacher in a little humble village high in the Alps where everybody has the same last name. And I sit down with Ollie and his wife Maria, and I just ask him questions. Recently I said, Ollie, how can you Swiss people so docilely pay such high taxes? And without missing a beat, he says, well, what's it worth to live in a country where there's no homelessness, no hunger, and where everybody, regardless of how wealthy their parents are, have access to quality health care and education? Now he's not a crusader, he's kind of a conservative guy in his community, but that's a European sensibility, you see. And I find it very challenging and stimulating to hang out with these people and talk to them. One thing clear to me, Americans are compassionate people, but we're not very good at dealing honestly with the gap between rich and poor. It's just awkward for us. And when you travel, if you travel honestly and with your window down, you've got the grubby little fingers of reality coming in the window at you. And you really need to think about it and deal with it. And in my travels, I've found that even if you're motivated only by greed, if you know what's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's just not a nice place to raise your kids. You see it when you go south of the border. I've spent a lot of time in Central America, and any middle-class community pools its money to have an armed guard on every street corner so the kids can go to the park safely. Every pharmacy, every bank, every hotel has an armed guard. Even if you can afford to live behind those designer fortifications, it's not a successful society. And you learn a lot about our country by leaving it and looking at it from a distance and seeing countries that have not dealt with the problems we're dealing with in their higher contrast, like this gap between rich and poor. I just think it's so exciting when you travel, you realize how precious every little child is. It's such an easy thing for politicians to say, remember the children, as long as they're ours. But these kids are just as precious as our kids, even if they don't have parents all day because they're scavenging in some garbage dump to get a little food for tonight. And I'll tell you, half of the kids on this planet, it seems like, they lose their mom every day as she abandons them to walk for water. That's the average lot in life for women, is to walk for water. They have to walk further for water every year. That's a major problem. Now, my girls got money for straight teeth and money left over for whitener. And I noticed that every kid in her class had that much money, $5,000 to gather together to get braces. And that's right, because we work hard, we got a winning system, my daughter gets straight teeth, that's okay. But that doesn't deny the fact that for 2 sets of braces, You could drill a well in a thirsty village where every mom has to abandon their children just to get water. And you could give that community water for the cost of 2 sets of braces here. And then those moms wouldn't have to walk across the county every day to get water, they'd walk across the square. Now, even if you're only motivated by national security, it's a challenge for us to think about soft power instead of hard power. Think about soft power. It takes $1 million to keep one of our soldiers in Afghanistan for a year. We need to have soldiers there, I'll grant that, but every one costs something. You could take some of that investment and put it into soft power. For the cost of 1 soldier, you could drill 100 wells and give 100 communities water in lands where they raise their kids to not like America. And then every morning, the thought shapers of the next generation would go across the square instead of across the county, and when they pumped water for their family, they would think, God bless America. Now, that's pretty powerful. You could do that. It's not going to happen because nobody makes money off that here when you build a $10,000 well over there, you know, so it's going to be a tough sell. But if you appeal to people just for your selfish national security interest, it is a defensible idea. But that's something that I think we can work on. There's so many exciting challenges, complex challenges, unprecedented challenges facing us as a nation today. And in our travels, we can at least gain an empathy for people outside of our border, the other 96% of humanity, and make better decisions. Let me just close with one of my favorite exercises as a tour guide. When I'm taking a group through Turkey, as we've been doing for 25 years, I love to have my group sit down with a dervish and understand why he whirls. You know these guys that get all dizzy when they pray? It's kind of like cruise ship entertainment for most American tourists. So I'll just paraphrase this. I don't remember the exact words, but I had my group in Konya, the home of Mevlana, and I wanted them to meet a dervish and see him pray. So I found a dervish, and I said, "Hi, I'm an American tour guide. I've got 25 Americans. Can we watch you whirl?" And he said, "I'm not a photo op. I'm a monk. But if you want to watch me, I'll let you sit around while I pray, as long as I can explain what I'm doing." I said, "Great." So he said, we all gathered on his rooftop. The sun was going down. He was dressed up in his monk's outfit. And he said, "I'm a dervish." That's the Muslim equivalent of what you would call a monk. "And being a dervish, I follow Mevlana, which you probably call Rumi. And he's the prophet of love among us Muslims, kind of like St. Francis in your religion. Easy to get your brain around him. Everybody likes Francis. Everybody likes Mevlana. 5 times a day, I get myself into a meditative trance, and I contemplate the teaching of my prophet, my teacher, Mevlana. Not prophet, teacher. And I lose myself in that thought." And he said, "I plant 1 foot in my community, and the other foot goes around the world. My foot is in my community, my home. The other one acknowledges and celebrates the diversity on God's great creation. One hand goes up to accept the love of our Maker, and the other hand, like the spout of a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on his creation. And 5 times a day, I lose myself in that beautiful thought, and I become a conduit of God's love." And we looked at him, and I'll never believe this, as a tour guide, gathered around, as his head tilted over and his robe billowed out, and he lost himself in that beautiful idea. And then I looked at the faces of my tourists, overcome with wonder. And something that was quite scary and confusing to them suddenly became a little more real and less scary. And we all went home with a little better understanding of this planet. And for me, that's just like the epitome of what travel's all about. And if we can do that and bring that home, that broader perspective, I think, is the most valuable souvenir. And then when we implement that here as citizens of this great nation of ours, we're making travel a political act. And I think that's a very constructive thing. Thank you very much. I know I talked a long time, but if you have to go, that's fine. But I'd like to not abuse your attention, but just take 5 or 10 minutes for questions if I could, and then we'll call it good. Is that all right? So, and I'll just repeat your question. Speak loudly if you can. Yeah.
Hi. Technology has exploded over the last few years. Everyone has iPhones and iPads, and I know you have a very full website. You do audio tours and things like that with devices. Do you feel like over that time you've seen that technology has helped to distance people from travel?
That's a good question. There's so much technology. Has that distanced us or helped us? I remember recently I was in Venice trying to get a shot of lovers on the gondola. You know, two people spend $100 for 40 minutes on the gondola to go under the Bridge of Sighs. You'd think they'd like kiss or hold each other close, but they're looking at their screens. It was hard to find anybody focused on the moment. And I've been with friends that are just in a magic moment, and we forget to experience it because we want to capture it and put it on our Facebook page or whatever. And you know, that's fun, but it really is a major loss if you can't really be there. You know, I was just talking to Pico Iyer on my radio show, and he's all into that, you know. And there's actually resorts that are intentionally unplugged, and there's museums now in Europe that are not allowing cell phones during certain hours, so people can't. I was just in the Louvre. I think I was at like maybe it was Mona Lisa even, and I almost got trampled by a bunch of people just charging the painting with their cameras raised. I just got. You know, my radio show is an old-fashioned radio show which has 3 interviews in 1 hour. What's really happening now is little magazine shows, 6, 4, 5-minute things all hour. My mentor in public radio, the programmer wizard of Seattle Station, sat me down and he says, if you don't get you know, into this ADD way of radio, you're going to be out of business. And he showed me a photograph 10 years ago, people at a rock concert looking at the concert. And in the same shot now, everybody had their hands up, not having the magic of being there, I think. So maybe I'm just an old guy that's a Luddite about this, but I think that there's beautiful things about technology, and I'm so thankful I'm working now when we have this technology. For instance, my app is free, and it's got 40 or 45 2-hour guided tours, and you can be lost in the wonder of a museum without having to read your guidebook and be understanding all of the Sistine Chapel or the Pantheon or whatever. You can sit on the front row of that gondola or that Vaporetto in Venice and go down the Grand Canal, and I can narrate every palace and bridge to you as we go by it. That's a constructive use of technology, I think. But we have to be careful that we put our cameras down and we just actually be there also. I'll go out there and take pictures for you. You can just enjoy it and then wash it up. But it's an issue. We renovated, what is the word? We updated this book here the most radically that we have in like 20 years. Reworked the whole last half of it with all my back doors so it covers every country more thoroughly. And we revamped the beginning with real tune into tech issues, cell phone issues, getting online issues, also crowdsourcing. A big change these days is crowdsourcing. People are they brag about they're doing their whole trip based on uncurated feedback from people on TripAdvisor. And you know, it's a worthwhile resource, but I think it's important not to let it dictate where you're going to go. Just because everybody says that's the best Tex-Mex place in Paris, I don't want Tex-Mex in Paris. You know, you need to. I'm speaking for guidebook writers. You know, we curate the information, we factor in an interest in the local culture and this kind of thing, rather than people who are just giving their feedback on a place. And I think there's a balance there. Any other questions in the back? Yeah.
I have a comment and a question. We recently spent a couple weeks in Scandinavia, and I have to say, without a doubt, taking your book on Scandinavia with us made such an incredible difference in all the details, including Oslo on May 17th. I just wanted to thank you in person for that. My question is, will you be writing any more about traveling through the U.S.? Because I think I've come to the conclusion that most people in this country don't necessarily have the same value system as us in San Francisco. And I think there could be as much learning through traveling through the U.S. Will you be writing, I know you have 20 cities in 20 days, will you be doing any more on domestic travel?
No. I'd love to do more on domestic, but I'd be the blind leading the blind. And when I'm in this hemisphere, I'm not really paying that much attention. I see Europe as the wading pool for world exploration. I've got 100 people, and we're focusing just on Europe, so that's what we really want to do. Thank you for those comments. And Scandinavia is, I've got a real passion for Scandinavia. It's frustrating for me as a guidebook writer because that book sells one book for every 20 I'd sell of Italy or Paris or Germany, you know. But really, Scandinavia is a great place to travel. And that would be a good reminder to mention that Book Passage has all of, for every country, every city. I've got a guidebook that gives this, the guidebooks of mine are the best-selling guidebooks for every country in Europe now, and they originated as the handbooks for my tours. And I long before I was writing guidebooks, I was taking little tours around Europe, and I always prided myself in having real honest, nice people. I never checked ID for checks or anything like that. And I'd leave the handbooks for my tours laying around during my lectures, hoping people would thumb through the handbook for the tour, like what they see, and take the tour. Time and time again, they would thumb through the book, like what they see, and take the book. And I thought, this book is driving decent people to theft. It needs to be available for sale. So I made that, the handbook to the Rick Steves, France in 22 Days tour, a book called Rick Steves' France in 22 Days. And I honestly put everything I knew about doing the tour into the book so people could do our tour without us. And that's what spawned this series of books. And eventually we abandoned the 22 Days thing, but it still has that passion for smart use of your time and everything you need to do our tours without us. And I just really, I love it when people can want to do what we do on our tours, but take it on their own. I like it also when people take our tours. This year was our best year on our tour program, by the way. We took 20,000 people on our tours. We had 700 or so tours, 30 different itineraries. My favorite statistic is half of the people who signed up for our tours were repeat customers. For the right people, it's the perfect vacation. For the wrong people, it's a hellish vacation. So be careful about that. But I mentioned I used to guide the tours for 25 years. For the last 10 years, I've been taking the tours. I can't advertise cool people take our tours, but it really is a joy to be not only with a great guide, who's completely paid up front, by the way. Our guides are the best paid guides in Europe from the start, and then they're on your side from beginning to end. Whereas the other bus companies, the standard operating procedure is not to make money on the original price, and then to sell you stuff and get kickbacks throughout. Angle for tips, park you outside of town, so you have to take the optional tour to get into town, and take you shopping instead of the important museums. That's how they get their profit, but their business plan is backwards. That's what inspired me to start my tour company back in the 70s, was to have a more straightforward sense of business. Look at any big budget tourist plan on a fast tour in Amsterdam. None of them will go to Van Gogh. All of them will go to diamond polishing. Why is that? Well, obviously, if you're trying to make money, it costs $15 a person to take them to Van Gogh, and there's no kickbacks on Van Gogh's purchased. And if you go to the diamond polishing, the guide and the bus driver get whisked away upstairs to this royal lounge where they really wine and dine them. And then for an hour, the group is in the care of the guide that takes them to the diamond polishing, and then you get the hard pressure sell. And 20% of all the purchases go back to the guide, the driver, and the tour company. And if you love your wife, you'll buy her a diamond in Amsterdam. That's the whole notion that you get explained to you. And there's no time to shop around on a fast tour. So in my Europe Through the Back Door book, I talk a lot about those ins and outs of how to take a tour. By the way, the best way you can take advantage of those tours, because they're impossibly cheap, think of them as a bus pass that comes with comfortable, forgettable American-style hotels. Equip yourself with a guidebook, skip out of lunch even if it's included, and you're freeloading on that tour. You'd spend less per day with transportation and everything than you would spend if you walked in off the street and bought just a hotel room alone. So I think it's a great idea for somebody who doesn't want to go to youth hostels and have a year rail pass. Let somebody else do the driving, but they'll make no money off of you. They'll actually lose money if you just give them the money to get on the bus, you see. But it's a challenge not to get sucked into all that other stuff. Yeah?
Are you, now that the baby boomers are getting getting on,
we're not.
Are you, well, we try our best. Are you going to be putting together like special groups sort of for
Slower.
the like
Yeah. No, this is an issue. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm growing up with all of my travelers, and we do things a little more comfortable. We got more money, and we're a little more, we need a little more nice touches and so on. And our tours have evolved this way just by the demand of our return customers. We try to fit the style and the needs of our travelers. We're doing something that's going to be less fast. It's going to be 3 nights in a row instead of 2 nights in a row. That's what we're going to do. And we also have a program called My Way, which is $1,000 cheaper than a normal tour, and it gives you the whole package of the tour, but free time so you can do things on your own. So the independent types, the more serious budget travelers, and older travelers that just want to take it easy, a lot of them take the My Way tour, And we've got enough material now where you can do it your way with this material and save a lot of money by not having the private guide. See, we have small groups, half as many people, 25 on a 50-seat bus, and the guide's paid up front. So that's kind of a luxury, and if you take full advantage of it, that's great. But if you're not, then you shouldn't be spending all that money for your guide in your small group. That's the My Way program. Some people ask me, how do we make any money on our tours? And if I can just talk 25 people into sharing a vehicle instead of renting cars or using train passes, right there's more than enough money to make me happy, and then everything else can be a wash from the cost for the traveler compared to your rail or car rental and a tour bus, and then it can be a real good value for the traveler. And my hunch is you accomplish 50% more per day on a good tour than you would on your own, figuring out as you go. I still like to travel on my own, but I'll tell you, every year, as I mentioned, I take one of our tours, and on about day 3 it occurs to me, this is really the life. I don't know where we're going to have lunch, but it's going to be good. And then we're going to have some activity in the afternoon, and we'll get to our hotel, and I know that there's good guides waiting for us all along. Question here.
Have you been to Luxembourg?
Have I been to Luxembourg? That is a question I dread, because I don't know Luxembourg. I've been there a couple of times, but it falls through the cracks. It was designed because it was so important that it shouldn't be in anybody's country, because it was strategically too important. So they made this little forever independent or unaligned country, and I have not been there.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people ask me, is it German? Is it French?
Yeah.
Or is it Belgium? No, we are Luxembourg.
Very good. Luxembourg is Luxembourg. Let's hear it for Luxembourg. Okay, 2 more questions. Yeah.
We have the DVDs, the CDs of KQED, and so my wife and I watch you lots of times before we go to bed.
Thank you.
And we're in a little shop. I forget what those he was selling. But he was talking to us all about the contratti.
Yeah.
And then he's also talking about how tax evasion is a big game, and everybody does that. And I don't know if you know about that or not, but if you do, I'd like to hear how that, all the economic stuff you talked about, how that fits into that.
Well, the tax evasion, in Italy especially, tax evasion is like a national pastime. It's a sport. And I'd rather they enforce the tax policies really strictly and everybody pays. But over there they have to, because not many people pay it, they have to have too high of taxes and hope to get 50% of it or something like that. But it's a real problem. But every couple of years they come up with a new law that requires, for instance, every cafe to give you a printed receipt, and you have to keep that receipt with you for 50 yards from the place. And if the policeman, the tax person, stops you after buying something, if you don't have that receipt, you're guilty just as well as that person. They're trying different ways to come down on it, but it's a real issue in Italy to enforce those taxes, as it is in much of Europe. One more question, and then we'll call it a day. Yes?
I was recently for the first time in Rome, and I read in your guidebook that if you're going to be there a certain number of days, you have to go to the police and register. Well, I didn't do that, but I wondered, is that really true, and why?
Well, if that was in my guidebook, that was a long, long time ago. She mentioned you got to register with the police. There was a time, I think way back when, 20 years ago, when legally they had to sign you up, and if you stayed in a bed and breakfast, they didn't have the way to do that, and you had to fill in the form at the corner police station or something like that. But that's been ages since that happens. In many countries, they need to take your passport. A lot of Americans don't understand why, but that's because they have to sign you up so they know where you are every night. A lot of Americans are famous for being very nervous about giving their passport up. It's as if somebody takes it, they can go home in your place, you know. And you got to get loose with that a little bit, because occasionally in different countries they need to, when the hotel asks for your passport, you got to give it to them. It's not polite or realistic to expect them to drop what they're doing and do all their bookwork for you because you don't want to let your passport go. On the other hand, it's not realistic for them to expect you will not have your passport until tomorrow. You can say, when can I come back and get this passport? And generally they'll say, in an hour or so I'll have it done and give it to you back. And I think that's a very good idea. Too many times I've prowled through everybody's passport and grabbed mine on my way out of a hotel, and they're casual about their passports, but we don't want to do that. Hey, I want to remind you, I'm sorry that my newsletters didn't come through, but I hope you can watch the Holy Land show. We've got 12 new shows debuting right now all across the country on public television. Prague, Berlin, the Loire, Cinque Terre, the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Western Turkey, Eastern, Central Turkey, and so on. And you can learn all about that at KQED or on my website. If you have any questions about our tour program or any of the stuff that we're doing, you can go to ricksteves.com. I will be hanging out over by the cafe, and I'd be happy to autograph whatever you want. And also, you know, it's so important that we have independent bookstores in this country, and I really look forward to coming to Book Passage every time.